Congratulations, man.
William Smith Jr. and James Yates were the first same-sex couple today to get a marriage license in Rowan County Clerk Kim Davis's office. A short time later, 3 more same-sex couples followed. That's because Davis herself remains in jail for defying a federal court order to issue marriage licenses. This morning, Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee seemed to imply that Kim Davis is being punished more severely than some of America's most notorious serial killers.
She's being held without bail. I want you to think about this. Jeffrey Dahmer got bail. Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, got bail. John Wayne Gacy got bail. Kim Davis, because she followed her convictions, is put in jail and is not given bail.
According to her lawyer, Mathew Staver, Davis is prepared to stay in jail rather than, quote, violate her conscience, which in this case means her religious beliefs that marriage is the union of one man and one woman. In a press conference this afternoon, Staver said the licenses were void because they lacked a signature from Kim Davis. Then he compared his client to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
So she's now stuck with a decision. Do I resign as an elected official when the people want me there in Rowan County, where I've been doing a good job, or do I sacrifice my conscience? She's not going to resign. She can't sacrifice her conscience, so she's willing, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in a letter from the Birmingham jail, to pay the consequences of that decision, and that's why she's here, although she shouldn't be.
Joining me now, Mathew Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, a legal group representing Kim Davis. Mr. Staver, there's no victory here. There's no path to victory. I mean, how do you understand the end game here?
Well, there certainly is no victory when Kim Davis, an innocent person, is actually incarcerated. In fact, one of the marshals even said that never before had he arrested someone who committed no crime. She's committed no crime.
She's been found in contempt. She's been found in contempt of court. People do occasionally get put in jail for being in contempt of court. I've actually reported on people that that's happened to.
You know, as far as the end game is concerned, that's going to be in part up to the judge, but it's also going to be in part up to the appellate court, because there's so much due process has been violated in this case. Kim Davis, I know this, will do 2 things. As I mentioned, she will not resign unless the people want her to be removed, and they put her there and they want her to stay there. And number 2, she's going to not sacrifice her conscience. She can't violate her conscience. It's just a line she can't cross.
What's the limiting principle on that conscience? If she did not want to give marriage licenses to interracial couples, would that be okay?
Well, we've got express constitutional amendments to that effect, and the question here is there a reasonable accommodation?
I'm sorry, let's just be clear here. The express constitutional amendments to that were only found in 1967 in Loving v. Virginia, right? It wasn't actually spelled out. That was a Supreme Court decision that found that. And the question is, post-Loving v. Virginia in 1967, if someone had done this, should they also have the right to carry on their duties and not give marriage licenses to interracial couples?
The difference is before and after the Supreme Court decision, marriage was always and still remained the union of a man and a woman. There were express constitutional amendments against racial.
Let me just answer the question.
There was express constitutional amendments against racial discrimination. They injected race into a marriage between a man and woman. It didn't change the essence of marriage before or after loving.
But that's just defining the racism
but that's just defining
away the question. If really the issue here, as you say, is conscience, right? Then that sort of jurisprudential argument doesn't seem to me to apply. I mean, the question is, what does her Christian conscience tell her? If someone's Christian conscience did not allow them to, for instance, issue divorce certificates, I mean, Jesus himself condemned divorce, let's be clear, should they be able to do that?
Well, let's be very clear. Throughout the millennia of human history, we've never had same-sex marriage.
But Jesus...
We've never had it in Kentucky. We've never had it in the United States. It wasn't her job duty when she ran for office in 2014, and it was changed by 5 people 2 months ago.
But answer the question, answer the question about divorce. I really do want to know the limiting principle here.
But marriage is still... The essence of marriage has always been the union of a man and woman. When it's fundamentally changed, not whether you can or not get married because of divorce or not divorce, that doesn't fundamentally change marriage. But when you change it to something that's never been in the history of America or millennia, that's fundamentally different.
Mr. Staver, no-fault divorce is perhaps the most radical change to marriage that has happened in centuries, and there were many people, including the Pope, who said so when it was introduced, okay? So my question is, as a matter of conscience...
A clerk doesn't have anything to do with that.
As a matter of conscience...
authorizes under their name and the authority a marriage that has never been in the existence of the history of millennia, that's fundamentally different, and that collides with her conscience. The only thing she's she's asking for is this.
The question,
remove her
sir,
name and her authority from the certificate, and she can file it, she can issue it. That's a simple accommodation for conscience, and that's very easy to do.
Let me ask you this. How is your organization doing in terms of fundraising right now?
Why don't you ask that question of the ACLU?
Well, they're not standing in front of me, but I'd be happy to. I think they did quite well.
But you've never asked that question of the ACLU, have you?
How are you doing?
Why don't you ask that to the ACLU when they represent their people? Why don't you ask that of the people who represented
Mr. Staver,
O.J. Simpson, wherever they were getting their money? That is absolutely irrelevant to the issue. The issue here is what you don't want to address. And the issue here is accommodate her conscience and religious freedom. It's very easy to do. You may not want to address that, but that's the simple issue here.
Mr. Staver, there are allies of yours who have been talking to reporters saying that they think you are taking Kim Davis for a ride and basically raising money off her plight. So I'm just asking you the question. How are you doing on fundraising this week?
Anyone who asks that question does not know Kim Davis. Kim Davis has a strong conviction and conscience. She contacted us for representation. We are representing her. I can tell you we're putting a whole lot more money into the cost and expenses than we would ever get from this case.
All right.
This is never about fundraising. This is about protecting someone's conscience. If you can't get that simple idea that we've got freedom of religion and conscience rights, and the question is not whether she's sincere, not whether there's a collusion, but is there a reasonable way to accommodate her convictions? And yes, there is.
With all due respect, the question is there a limiting condition? You failed to give me one in this interview, Mr. Staver.
No, the question is whether there's a reasonable accommodation.
Thank you for joining us.